Facebook people, YouTube people, if you're watching this on one of those two platforms, what's up? Aren't you guys feeling special, this little tiny segment before we start the actual podcast? Because the podcast people don't actually hear this part. You guys, I think it's you guys spending a little bit more time with me. Aren't you feeling special? Just kidding. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get to this episode, because this episode's going to be a little bit of a doozy. I'm really regretting putting ice in this cup, because that's gonna be really annoying. Alright, well, without further ado, without dilly-dallying, we're going to go ahead and get this podcast started. Ready? Let's go. Hey, my sweet insomniacs. Thank you so much for tuning into the Project Phoenix podcast, your source for the best smooth jazz 24/7. To get your mood into the groove, yo, is what I would say if this was a jazz podcast, and it's not. Although, I changed up the music a bit. I'm having a hard time finding music, guys, for this podcast. I like the kind of lo-fi vibe, but I just can't find like the right song. So I'm playing around with music. Let me know if you guys, from all the podcast episodes I have out so far, let me know what you guys like the best. But until I find the one I like, I think I'm gonna mess around. Anyways, let me redo that intro. You guys are, in fact, yes, tuned into the Project Phoenix podcast, but this is not a smooth jazz 24/7 podcast to get your mood into the groove. This is a podcast about self-development, mental health, and personal growth, and that's the topics we're going to talk about here, because that's what we do. So today's podcast is a little bit hard for me to talk about. I don't know if I say that in every podcast. I probably do. No, but this one is going to be hard. Today's my dad's 58th birthday. Well, it would have been his 58th birthday, but he passed away back in 2014. And, yeah, it's, this is going to be a hard episode for me. But every year on his birthday, on one of my channels that I've ever done, I usually talk about this topic because, it's a good time to talk about grief, and it's a good time to, and I just need to talk to somebody about it. So I'm going to take this day and talk about kind of grief and touch on that subject inspired by my dad. So bear with me. There might be a lot of pauses, because I'm actually going to be talking about this without using any kind of notes whatsoever. Normally I have kind of a little script, some notes written, but today I'm just kind of going with my gut and going with my feelings. So if I ramble on like I'm doing right now, I apologize. But this is free solo. We're free soloing this. Okay, so as I mentioned, my dad passed away in 2014, and every year there's 2 days of the year that's really rough for me. That's September, when he actually passed away, and then December 21st. And you guys are going to be hearing this tomorrow, which is December 22nd, so, yeah, so every year on his birthday, I always get a slice of German chocolate cake and a can of Pepsi, because German chocolate cake was his favorite cake of all time. Every year he loved German chocolate cake, and we'd always try to get it for him, or I'd make it from scratch when I finally learned how to bake. And then he always drank Pepsi. I mean, I've never seen, and when I say he always drank Pepsi, I'm 100% like he always drank Pepsi. I've never seen that man without a can of Pepsi. I don't know if I've ever seen him drink water, except when he was taking, like, pills. Like when he was taking prescription pills. Sorry, I'm burping today because of the Pepsi. I always burp on the podcast. I don't understand. I don't burp normally like this in real life. I don't understand why I burp so much on this podcast. Anyways, so he always had a can of Pepsi with him, which I honestly think is one of the reasons why he developed diabetes, because he was always drinking Pepsi from the time he woke up, time he went to bed. He used to get those crazy big gulp size that you get at the gas stations here in the States, those huge ones for like 64 ounces or more. I don't even know what they are, but he would fill that up with Pepsi, and then he would refill that probably 2 or 3 times a day. And then on top of that, he would have bottles and cans at home. Like, he was a Pepsi drinker. But each year I would get a German chocolate cake and a little can of Pepsi to kind of like, celebrate his birthday. And I did that today. Although I didn't get German chocolate, I had to settle for cheesecake, because I went to 4 different stores and I could not find German chocolate cake. I don't know if some YouTuber out there is buying up all San Jose's supply of German chocolate cake to make some kind of prank video. I have no idea, but there was like a shortage of German chocolate cake in San Jose. So, yeah, it was crazy. Anyways, we're going to talk about grief, because every year on this day, I tend to look back on the last few years that I've been, I've had to live without my dad, how his death has impacted me, and each year it's a little different, So I wanted to kind of touch on that today, because I think grief is one of those topics that everyone kind of shies away from, especially those who've never experienced it, because they just don't understand. And people who do understand often don't talk about it because, one, nobody really understands where you're coming from, and 2, after a while you don't want to bore is a bad word, not bore your friends, more like, just burden your friends with constant talk about, grief and sadness and stuff. So, and it's also the holidays. We have Christmas coming up in 4 days, and I think this time of year it's really hard for a lot of people, and so I think it's a really good time to talk about grief. In fact, I just had a lady today who came into my work, and she was telling me, sweetest lady, she was so sweet and kind, and she was telling me that she had lost her nephews, 2 of her nephews, both 29 years old. One had a brain aneurysm, and I forgot what the other one had, but they passed away, and she found out her sister had just gotten news that she has cancer, like a pretty aggressive form of it, and it's hard for people. I mean, it's hard all the time. Grief is hard for everybody, but especially this time of year, I know how hard it can be, because it is for me. But, everything I say today isn't really something that I'm telling anybody out there that they have to feel, because I'm sure anybody listening to this are going to be on completely different levels of grief. Some people, it might be fresh. Some people, it might be 20, 30 years, and so they've had a little bit more time in between losing a loved one and then, just life. In which case, it's it's different feelings from fresh. I mean, the pain never, I wouldn't say never goes away. Eventually, it does subside, and you can live normally, but, it does come in waves even now. But, I don't know. I know that there's people listening, there's going to be different type of people in different stages of grief. So, my dad was my best friend. And anytime I needed anything, anytime, I needed advice, anytime I wanted to talk to him about, something, that happened to me, like good news, before I even called my mom, I would immediately pick up the phone and call my dad. I was daddy's girl. He was my closest confidant. I told him everything. And my dad and I had a really special connection. I think between me and his two sisters, I don't think anybody really knew him as well as we did. Him and I had a connection because, my dad struggled with mental health all his life, and I also struggled with it on and off, and I think we connected a lot on that level. And I was also an empath, so between understanding a little bit about where he was coming from and also being very susceptible, not susceptible, but very in tune with emotions, my dad and I connected quite a bit. I think by the time I was a teenager, our relationship was more of like best friends than it was father and daughter. He was a good guy. He had a lot of his own personal demons, but he had a heart of gold. He was a really, really good guy. And I think about that a lot. There's a lot of times where people will ask me, Kit, how would you bring your dad back if you could? Or, people sometimes ask me that, which I think is kind of weird. But, I think about that every so often. I think that answer isn't as simple as the question, I guess. Yes, I would love to have my dad come back. I would love to see him again. I would love to hug him. I would love to hear his voice. I would love to be able to talk to him, the simple things. But the more time has passed since he passed away, there's a lot that I'm realizing that I have gained personally, and the strength that I've developed from having to get through the grief has made me the person I am today. And I don't know if I would necessarily take that portion back. And it's so weird when I say that, because there is a part of me, and I'm just going to say it straight, there is a part of me that's grateful for what has happened, losing him. But not like grateful in that, like, I want him dead, kind of way. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is having accepted the fact that he's gone and analyzing what feelings I'm allowed to have left. I would say gratitude is one of them, if that makes sense. It's so crazy because, when I talk about this, I always feel like I'm making it all about myself. But, the reality is it kind of is, because the person, my dad's not here, he's gone. It can't be about him because he's gone. So what's left is the individual people that he's left behind, and we kind of have to make that experience of losing him about ourselves. And when he first passed away, I remember being so mad. I didn't internalize his passing very well. When he passed away, I cried, but I tried to hold it in so much. Because I didn't want people to think I was weak. I felt like I had to be strong for other people who were grieving. I had a business I had to run, that was just starting out. Like, I didn't have time to sit and grieve. And so I held and bottled all that feeling in. And that's the thing about grief, right? And this is one of the things that I always warn people who are going through grief. I just met a girl the other day who just lost somebody close to her, and she was saying, sometimes I'm afraid I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. And I told her, girl, if you're going to have a nervous breakdown, have a nervous breakdown. allow yourself to have a nervous breakdown. And this goes for anybody grieving, whether you just lost somebody or whether, it's been a while, but every once in a while, you get those waves of grief. If you feel like crying, if you feel like grieving, if you feel like you're going to break down, break the fuck down. Because I made that mistake. I made that mistake of trying to be this like strong person emotionally, which eventually led to me having a nervous breakdown and a panic attack, and basically becoming a hermit for an entire year, not being able to leave my house, becoming this massive, crazy hypochondriac with PTSD, like not processing my emotions properly through the grief of losing my father led me to have those breakdowns. And that in itself ended up becoming, a gift in its own. And I'm going to explain the term I'm using here, gift, in a second, but that taught me a massive amount of lessons. So everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. But if you're going through this grief and you're feeling that crying sensation, that breakdown sensation, let it happen, because it's your body's way of physically releasing that grief. And you'll find a lot of times that if you allow yourself that ability to just break down, instead of trying to force a smile or, force something positive, oftentimes you end up trapping that negative energy without releasing it, and it ends up doing more damage. So that's a really big thing that I found. And grief, the range of grief, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Is it's the length of time doesn't matter. It some people experience it for a short time, some people experience it for years, and there is no right time for this to stop. Like, don't let anybody make you feel bad for feeling pain and grief and sadness and hurt and frustration 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. There's no time limit to grief. But there is processing. There is a right and wrong way of processing, I think. And we're going to talk about that now. So when I talk about gift, everyone kind of goes, ugh, when I use that word. But, my dad, in his passing, gave me one last gift that he could give me. And that was the lesson that life is so short. That life is very, very short, and that life is extraordinarily precious. And that's something I wouldn't have understood without experiencing losing him. Because up until that point, I had never lost anybody in my life. And at least not somebody close to me. And up until that point, I viewed life as this kind of almost like constant thing. Like, death was one of those things that was far out of my reach, and it was a foreign concept more than anything. And in his passing, he made me understand how short life is and how precious it is. And there was a episode on YouTube of Special Books by Special Kids, which is an awesome YouTube channel. If you guys have a chance, check it out. The host, Chris Ulmer, and his girlfriend go around the country and the world interviewing people with disabilities and just, having them talk about it, just kind of help spread awareness. It's a wonderful channel, Special Books by Special Kids. But in this particular episode that I watched, he interviewed a family who lost one of their sons to DIPG, which, if I understand correctly, is a rare brain disorder. Or not disorder, cancer. I think it's a form of cancer, and they lost their son 2 years ago, and Chris went back to interview them about grief. And one of the parts of the video, Chris was talking to the camera, and he said that, you know, he used to view death as a finite thing, like this, once you die, that's the end. But what he's learned is death is actually not, it's the opposite. You know, death, even though the person physically is gone, their memories, their legacies are carried out through us and continue on through us. And that's something I've also come to realize and notice and understand. But I think we have a choice. See, I think in life there's top three pillars to inner peace and inner joy. And that's awareness, self-awareness, compassion, and perception. And everything that happens in our life is all about perception. How we end up, our actions, everything, how our life ends up is from the choices that we make, from the things that we perceive. And when I lost my dad, I had several choices to make in the way I perceived his death. One, I could see it as unfair. I could look at everybody around me who looked outwardly looked much more unhealthy than my dad ever did, and be like, this is not fair. Why did he have to go when this person is alive? And they look so much more unhealthy than he does. And that is a thought that did cross my mind. For the first couple years, I was so angry and I was so mad. I was like, why do I have to lose my dad? Well, that was a perception. I chose to see my dad's death as something that was so unfair. And it was hurting me to carry that much anger, to carry that much frustration. When the healing process for me began was when I decided to start seeing my dad's death as a final gift that he gave to me, in the way that he taught me how precious life is, and how through this hardship, this difficulty that I had to face going through losing him and trying to move on without him in my life, that strength that I gained, that empathy that I gained, that understanding that I've developed for, the deeper sense of the meaning of life, how much that has benefited me, and how much I've been able to help other people in the situation because I went through what I did with my dad. If this makes any sense. And I'm not saying you have to view it like this at all. This is just something that helped me. And I believe everything in life is about perception. Everyone says, there's that famous saying, I don't know what I'm meant to do in this life, or I don't know what my purpose is. And I'm always in that mindset that you create your own purpose. And this is kind of a similar situation where I believe that we have the decision to make choices on how we move on from a tragedy, such as losing somebody we love. Sorry. sorry, I don't mean to have like a moment of silence. I just when I finally realized that I had a choice in how I perceive his death, how I decide to move on from his death, that opened up so many doors for me. And I'm not talking about doors like opportunities and successes. I'm talking about doors in healing. I'm a firm believer that the best lessons in life are learned through some of our failures, or some of the negative parts of our life. We rarely learn from the positive moments of our lives. We always learn from our negative experiences. And the most negative experience I can think of is the grief of losing somebody. And that is the most painful experience anybody can go through. That's like the lowest of the low, in my opinion. But that's the one that I believe has the potential to teach us the most about life. I think through death, we learn the most about life. But only if we allow ourselves to view it that way. I'm not saying force a positive in a negative situation. But what I'm saying is, if you look close enough, there is a way to create a positive from a negative experience. That doesn't mean you are not allowed to grieve. That doesn't mean that, you should feel guilty for moving on or being happy. No. It's not about that. It's about healing, and it's about taking those experiences that you learned from the hardest, most painful experience in your life, and what can you create? And that creation isn't just you. That creation is their memory, their legacy that's living on through you. That's what Chris Ulmer was saying in that Special Books by Special Kids YouTube. Death isn't finite. The people that we love, the people that we lost, their energy, their legacy, all of that lives through you. So if you decide, to create that creation, a positive creation from a negative incident, a negative experience, you can use their legacy, their memory, and go on to build something positive. Is this making any sense? Maybe this is the reason I script podcasts. I probably should have my license of just talking taken away, because I'm pretty sure I'm not making any sense whatsoever to anybody. Sorry if you guys hear the clacking noise. That's ice in my cup. But I love my dad, and I miss him so much. But I realize that in order for me to move on, to heal, to create something good in their memory, not just for my own legacy, but the inherited legacy that I took on after my dad passed away, his legacy, in order for me to continue on, and for him to continue on to live through me, I have to figure out for myself how to turn that negative experience into a positive. And that's what I've been working on for the past, 2 years. Ever since I've had an epiphany on grief. But it can't be forced. This all has to come naturally. And I go back to what I said. If you're in this moment right now and you're like feeling like you're going to have a nervous breakdown, you're about to have this panic attack, you're about whatever, allow that to happen. Allow that to happen. Because true healing cannot happen unless we keep letting those negative energies flow through us. And once those negative energies start going away, we'll be able to take those whatever's left inside of us, which is their legacy, our legacy combined, and we'd be able to take something and create something beautiful from it. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I sound like a hippie who drank way too much beer and is now sitting in the campfire spouting nonsense. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, guys. Somebody stop me. But yeah. I've met a lot of people in my life who have lost somebody close to them. And it always goes one way or the other. They either let that death pretty much end them too. You know, like, I'm not saying that they committed suicide or anything, but what I'm saying is they allowed the death of somebody to be the end of their life. Like, they're living, but not really. And then you have other people who have taken the same experiences and have gone on to do amazing things to honor the people they've lost. And that's what I talk about when I say perception. It's how we decide to perceive, we decide to continue on from that makes a difference in our lives. I don't know if any one of you is struggling right now. If you've lost anybody. But my heart goes out to you. Because this is one of the most hardest experiences I think any of us will ever face, is losing somebody we love. But we have the ability to learn from this terrible experience and create something beautiful. And this could all be bullshit. Everything I'm saying could be bullshit. But it's one of the only few ways that I've found thinking like this that has been able to help me heal. So, God, I listen to every podcast after I'm done recording it. I have a feeling this one's not going to make any sense. Oh, guys. Okay. Well, I know the holidays are coming up, and I hope every one of you guys has a Merry Christmas. And if you don't, or if you're not feeling like it, that's okay too. Just allow your emotions to be what it needs to be right now. Let it figure itself out. Let it release any of the negative energy that it needs to, so that it can make way for more light in your life. Because there is. I know, especially when it's fresh, when it's just happened, it's hard to believe that. But there is. I believe it. Normally I end with kind of plugging the whole like and subscribe stuff off for the podcast and the YouTube channel and the Facebook page, but I'm not going to do that here because I don't know, it's not necessary, not for this one, not for this episode. But if you do feel that this podcast was helpful, this is one thing I will ask you to do, is share it with other people who might be grieving, who might need to hear this message. If you believe it could help somebody, please share. Because that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to heal myself, and I'm trying to help other people heal as well. So, yeah, I appreciate it. And no matter where you guys are in your life right now, just remember there's opportunity as long as your heart is beating. To be able to create something beautiful, to create your own legacy with the ones that you inherited from the people that we lost, their legacy as well. To carry on both of your legacies. You just have to be willing to grab that moment. So, okay. Well, I'm gonna go because I'm really tired. It's been an up and down emotional day. As most of you guys know, grief comes in waves, especially on days like this, like birthdays and holidays. You know, it's like you're doing okay, and then all of a sudden it's just like some invisible force punches you in the gut, and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And then you're winded and you're down for the count for a few minutes, and you're just crying and bawling, and then you get up again. And today was one of those days. So I'm gonna go and get some rest. But if you guys ever need to reach out to me for anything, please feel free to email me. I have my email in the description of this podcast episode. I think it's phoenixdareToRise@gmail.com. If you guys ever need any advice or just somebody to talk to, just reach out. Email me. And I'll help you out. Alright? Well, I love you guys. Again, I will talk to you guys later. See you in the next episode. I will be posting one more video actually on Christmas Day. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Love you.